Like it or not, electric cars are coming. In fact, they're here. This is the Hyundai Kona Electric, and it heralds the arrival of new electric vehicles that are both fairly affordable and have a good amount of range. It has a range of around 300 kilometers and it's priced starting from just under 150,000 ringgit. But is this any good in the real world? You know, the one that we all live in. Well, we've tested it and we're going to tell you, yes, right now. Let's go. As you know by now, the Hyundai Kona Electric, like all EVs, is exempted from import tax, excise duty and road tax. And like I said earlier, this is priced starting from just under 150,000 ringgit for the base E-Lite model. This is the E+, which has more equipment but the same mechanicals, and it is priced at 170,000 ringgit. There's also an E-Max model with the same specs but a bigger battery and a more powerful electric motor. That one though is quite pricey, 200,000 ringgit. That is BMW money. Now I should mention that these prices only include a 2-year manufacturer warranty. If you want to get a full 5-year unlimited mileage warranty, that costs an extra 10,000 ringgit. Outside, this car looks just like a Kona. You still have the funky split headlights and taillights. You've also got the chunky fender flares painted in body color here instead of grey in the other models. And you've also got the black roof on this particular model. However, there are a few differences, like the fact that this car lacks any sort of grille. Instead, you have this charging port which accepts both Type 2 and CCS chargers. Also on this car, you've got different front and rear bumpers. On the front, you have this little slot for your air inlet, and at the front and rear, you've also got twin silver slats. Along the side, again, this car looks very similar to the petrol Kona models, except the wheels. These wheels are an inch smaller than the top spec petrol models at 17 inches, but I do like the look of these wheels, this sort of flat-faced aero style two-tone wheels. I do really like them. I think they really suit the car, and I think they look bigger than they actually are. Also, if you look carefully down there, you can spot the battery pack, and that does reduce the ground clearance a little bit. Inside, again, it's very similar to the petrol Kona. You still get this sort of layered dashboard over here. You've got the twin brown air vents at the corners. You have this sort of pill-shaped center air vent, and you've also got a freestanding infotainment touchscreen, which, by the way, measures 8 inches across. Build quality is sort of a step down below what's available at this price range. This is, after all, still a base segment crossover, even though there are some soft touch plastics on the dashboard, as well as some leather coverings on the doors as well. However, it's still quite a pleasant place to be in, especially with these white seats which are covered in leather that is standard across all models. The only difference between the E-Lite and the other models is that the higher end models come with power adjustable front seats. One thing that's different for the electric model is that everything below the top surface of the dashboard is all new, and that includes the climate controls as well as this center control tunnel. Now that means is that because there is no physical gear lever, it's all controlled by these buttons over here. You've got plenty of space to put your purses, your wallets. I could even put a full-size DSLR in there. I know that's not a typical use case, but that's what I did. You've also got twin cup holders over here. You've got a electronic parking brake, which by the way doesn't engage when you put it into park. You've also got your auto hold and your drive mode buttons, and best of all, you have a wireless charger on the E+ and E Max models for you to put your phone in. The beauty of this is that you can simply put your phone in, close the lid, and you can use wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That is so good. The screen itself is not that great. It's not as sharp and as contrasty as I would have liked, and because this is a sort of mid-range model, there is some blank space over here that will usually be filled up with a larger screen. The instrument cluster though is fantastic, a 10.25-inch display that's super sharp, super contrasty and has good graphics. Also on the E Plus and E Max models, you have a head-up display in front of you. Other things that are new on the electric model, like I said, is this climate control system, which has some features that are not offered on the petrol models, like for instance a driver-only button, which if say you're not carrying any passengers, you can just blast cold air to only the driver, and that improves the range somewhat. However, it is only a single zone climate control system and not a dual zone one, and there are no rear aircon vents, which is a shame. You also don't get a 360-degree camera, you only got a reverse camera. And I need to point out something that I don't usually point out, which is that the 6-speaker sound system is trash. Let's go to the back. Back here, you can really tell that the Kona Electric is small relative to its price range. I'm 173 centimeters tall. This seat is in my driving position. As you can see, there is a decent amount of leg room, but foot space is quite tight. I can't slide my feet all the way in underneath, so it actually feels quite cramped. Headroom is also pretty limited. You have to put the headrest up to get comfortable at all, and you also only get one USB port down here. Again, no rear air vents. Back here you have 332 liters of boot space, which is okay, but it's not especially massive. It's around 50 liters smaller than the petrol version. What's good about this though is that you do have a slot over here. You kind of have to take out this to put your 3-pin charger underneath the boot floor. However, there is no space to put your optional Type 2 charger, so it has to go over here in the boot. Also, there is no powered tailgate, which is not such a good thing. Now enough talking, let's go drive this thing. The Kona Electric is powered by a single front motor producing 136 PS and 395 Newton meters of torque. Now that will get it from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 9.9 seconds on its way to a top speed of 155 kilometers an hour. Now those figures may seem quite little by today's standards, but I can assure you this car is not slow. Electric vehicles are famous for producing all of their torque from 0 RPM, and even this base model with its less powerful motor will get up to speed very quickly, and it will even spin its tires when it's going at lower speeds. This huge amount of torque only tapers off at higher speeds, but by then you're already going at over 100 kilometers an hour. Make no mistake, this is a very fast car in the city where you'll be spending most of your time. Now the E-Max gets an even more powerful 204 PS motor. That one will get you from 0 to 100 in 7.9 seconds, and it has a top speed of 167 kilometers an hour. And to be honest, that seems like a lot of power. I was driving this particular car to Malacca and back and thought that it was very fast, and only when I got back did I realize that it only had 136 horsepower. If that's for the least powerful motor, what's the 204 PS model going to be like? Now let's talk about the most important thing about an electric car, and that is the battery. This E Plus model as well as the E Lite gets a 39.2 kilowatt hour battery, and that provides a range of around 305 kilometers on the WLTP cycle. The E Max has a bigger 64 kilowatt hour battery, and that gives a range of 484 kilometers. Of course, the bigger battery is the one to have, but I've been driving this car all weekend, and even the smaller battery is good enough for most driving situations. Now, I have driven an electric car before, a Nissan Leaf, and that had a range of under 250 kilometers. And it does make a difference. That extra 60-70 kilometers, that does make a difference. There is a psychological shift when you go from something that has around 200 kilometers of range to something that has around 300 kilometers of range. With a smaller battery, you're a little bit more circumspect, you're a little bit more cautious. You start to think, am I going to make it the whole day with this amount of battery? I'm not so sure. Maybe I shouldn't take this car. Maybe I should take my petrol-powered car instead. When you have a car with a bigger battery, even with this car which doesn't have that big of a range, you start to make allowances. You start to think, oh, I can do this. This is totally fine. I can totally take this car to Malacca with only 60% of battery. And I did. I actually drove from KL to Malacca with a remaining range of around 220 kilometers. The trip was around 140 kilometers, and I still had around 60 kilometers of range remaining. I could simply drive around, find a place to charge the car, found one in Makota Parade in case you're wondering, plugged it up. It took 3 hours to charge to full, and I could spend the entire time walking around Malacca like a tourist. It was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, sure, maybe you can't go all the way to JB or Penang on one charge, but how often do you do that? And on the rare occasions that you do need to bring your car that far, there are charging stations all along the highway. There are fast charging stations being built as we speak. Shell has one in Tangkak, and you can simply go to Tangkak, charge your car, and be on your way to JB. It's totally fine. For most driving situations, even the 300 kilometer version is sufficient. Now we have to talk about charging for a second. The Kona Electric can accept up to 11 kilowatts of AC charging power. If you plug it up to a wall box at home or a public charger, it would take you around 4.5 hours to charge this thing to full, or 7.5 hours for the E-Max. This car can also accept up to 100 kilowatts of DC fast charging power. Now that is not widely available right now. Most of the DC charging stations in Malaysia only provide up to 50 kilowatts. And with that, this car will charge all the way up to 80% in 60 minutes or 90 minutes with the E-Max. Using the full 100 kilowatts of charging will get this thing up to 80% in around 47 minutes for both variants. Now, a wall box is really quite necessary if you're charging this thing at home. If you use a 3-pin charger, like the one that you have bundled with this car, it takes 22 hours to charge to full with the E-Lite and E-Plus models, and a whopping 31 hours for the E-Max. So you don't want to do that. And of course, this being an electric car, you hear nothing from the so-called engine. So it's very refined at lower speeds. But it's at higher speeds where you'll hear not the motor, but everything else. This car makes a lot of road noise. It's not so bad on smoother roads, but on coarse tarmac, you can really hear it. At highway speeds, it's not a very refined car at all, even though it makes zero engine noise. This is, however, quite a comfortable car to drive. Perhaps as a consequence of its smaller wheels, this car absorbs bumps quite well. Speed bumps and potholes are dealt with quite comfortably, and it doesn't really move about when you're going over undulations. It's only when you're on rougher tarmac that it sort of bounces around. You do really feel that this car has a torsion beam rear axle, but otherwise it's fine. Actually, this car is more than fine because the handling of this car is quite enjoyable. The responses of this car is quite immediate. The steering, the brakes and the throttle, they all feel quite sharp, and at first it takes some getting used to. But after a while you sort of get into a rhythm of this car and you really feel that this car is very fun to drive. You chuck it into the corner, the steering is quite accurate and very direct. There's not a lot of feel coming through the steering wheel, but that's not really such a bad thing. And this car also doesn't roll about in the corners. There's also quite a lot of grip, even from these low rolling resistance tires, and with the immediate torque coming from the motor, you can really exploit this car's limits. Safety-wise, the Kona Electric comes with a full complement of 6 airbags, stability control, autonomous emergency braking, lane centering assist, lane keeping assist, blind spot monitoring, and automatic high beam. Now, if you step up to the E-Plus and E-Max models, you also get adaptive cruise control with stop and go, as well as a door opening warning to warn you if you're about to open the door into traffic. Now, those are very good features to have, especially in this price range, and I'm happy to report that the adaptive cruise control works very well. It even accelerates when you're signaling right to overtake somebody, which is a very good feature, and it's something Honda has only introduced recently with the new Civic. The lane centering also works very well, and I didn't really have to mind it that much. When I was driving all the way to Malacca, I could simply put the hand on the steering wheel and just let it drive itself all the way there. This car also has an external speaker to warn pedestrians of its presence at low speeds, and it also makes a beeping sound when it's reversing. Now, in terms of energy regeneration, this car has 3 levels of regenerative braking, which you can adjust using the paddles on the steering wheel, and on its highest setting you can really just drive this car using only 1 pedal. Now, what's really unique about this car is the smart regeneration feature. Now, this uses the car's camera and radar to detect if there is a car in front, and it will use the regenerative braking to keep the car a set distance from the car in front. This is a very handy feature to use in city driving, and I really enjoyed using it. One thing of note though, this car doesn't brake for you to come to a stop, so do remember to use the brake pedal or else you'll hit the car in front. Overall, I've really enjoyed using this car. It is a very usable daily driver, and even though this is an electric car that's been built on top of a normal car's platform, it really feels that there has been a lot of thought put into the experience of this car. There are a lot of features that make this car really enjoyable and livable day to day. To sum up then, this is an excellent daily driver. Small enough that you can drive around in the city, but also with just enough range to bring you outside of city limits. Of course, the one with the bigger battery is the one to have, and it is quite expensive. But my time with the car shows that even the one with the smaller battery is good enough for most journeys. Yes, compared to other cars in its price range, it is a little bit small, especially on the inside. But no other car in this price range is as fun to drive, especially an electric one. For me, this car is worth every penny.